Welcome back, everybody, after what was a great lunch. My name's John Kofi. I'm the Deputy Pro-Vice-Chancellor for Research, focusing on research impact at the University of Warwick. It's my pleasure to talk about a project that I've heard a lot about, but don't really necessarily know the detail of today. We've got 4 people involved from the project, both from academia and practice. So the first thing I'm going to ask everybody to do is really just to talk about what their background is and how they became involved in this particular research project. And start with you, Jackie.
Okay, yeah, thanks, John. I'm a socio-legal researcher, normally do empirical work, normally do stuff around fair trial rights, suspects' rights, miscarriages of justice. But in my role as DPVC, I was doing a lot of work with City of Culture, and I also co-lead a Centre for Operational Police Research, catchily named COPPA. And as part of that, we were asked to do an evaluation of West Midlands Police engagement with City of Culture and the ways in which they used arts and culture as a way to connect with seldom heard communities. So it was a real shift in normally I'm critiquing the police directly. Now this was an evaluation. And so that's kind of how I got into this, and then started to work with Rachel Lewis, my colleague here. And we basically did a huge amount of field work, interviews, focus groups with police, with young people, with communities that the police had been reaching out to, artists, theatres, community organisations and so on, to try and understand, was this a productive way? We know that trust in policing is very low, public confidence in policing is very low, not just through Black Lives Matter, Sarah Everard and so on. This is a decades thing. Ever since I've been an academic, the policing, particularly of people of colour and young people, has been extremely problematic. Suspect populations have moved from, when I was younger, the Irish, and then moving through and so on. Anyway, so we were interested in, was this a way that was going to help them do what they had singularly failed to do for many, many decades? And was this a different route in to create this kind of non-threatening, collaborative space in order to have conversations and to have better understanding of the communities that they are policing? So that's kind of the research background, how this started right at the very beginning.
Okay, great, Jackie. Jen?
Hi, I'm Jen. I'm a theatre director and dramaturg. I'm from Coventry, and I mainly work in new writing. Short and sweet.
All right.
I can tell you more, but
that'll do for now.
That's me.
Rachel.
Thanks. Hi, I am Rachel Lewis. So I am an interdisciplinary social science researcher, maybe post-disciplinary. So I work in a research position in the law school with Jackie, and also I'm a teaching fellow in sociology. And in fact, my disciplinary background is applied linguistics. So basically, my work is about the ways in which the state, in the kind of broadest sense, excludes certain people, certain communities, excludes from equal access to resources, and excludes from equal access to a sense of belonging. So this is sort of my background and my kind of interest. And this obviously feeds in, therefore, to an understanding of policing, police as kind of agents of the state, and how the police articulate kind of relationships with communities, what they do in terms of their interactions with communities, and how we might understand what policing actually is. And so I don't want to say too much more about the project yet. Let's go to Amara, I think.
Amara.
Thank you. My name's Amara Spence. I'm from Birmingham. I'm an artist, a writer, many things. I'm sure all of us share that characteristic. A lot of my work is about sort of the relationship between culture, culture as rehearsal for the worlds that we actually want to live in, not the ones that we've all inherited. Infrastructure building and what that looks like as a systemic response to where we are. I love the idea of like writing as world building, and so to be part of this project as a writer and with someone who has lived experience of policing and is constantly directly impacted by the experience of policing, it felt really exciting isn't quite the right word, doesn't feel quite appropriate, but I felt really emboldened about being in this relationship and exploring what we went on to explore together.
Okay, so we will get to the part where we introduce the project. Who wants to do that? Have we got some images?
I can kick off, and then maybe Rachel can say a little bit about, and then Yeah. So having done the evaluation of the police's engagement through arts and culture, through City of Culture, that, as I say, was the kind of starting off point, I guess. And then we moved on and we wanted to explore some of those themes in more depth. And long story short, we came to the Belgrade and we thought it would be really interesting to explore some of those themes through theatre. And so we managed to pull together some money. The Belgrade were absolutely on board, and that fitted very much with their kind of social justice agenda. And then we got Joe Rose, who isn't here, who's the producer. We got Jen as the director and dramaturg, and then went through a commissioning process and were extremely fortunate to then have Amara on board as the writer. And then maybe, Rachel, you want to say a little bit more about the actual, what then happened at the Belgrade?
Yeah, sure. So what we had envisaged initially, I think, when we decided to do this, what we had initially envisaged was how can we kind of articulate the research that we've got through some kind of creative practice. So I think what we'd originally thought was we'll get a writer on board who will take the themes from our research, put it into a play, stick it on the stage, and, you know, an audience will come along. What happened was quite a lot more complex and organic and, you know, etc. But what we ended up doing was Amara wrote a piece which drew on the themes of our research, created this piece which was performed at the Belgrade on December the 1st, and we invited an audience to come in, and the audience included several schools of young people, select pupils from several schools, age around 14, 15 years old, also kind of community organisations, people who work in youth violence, as they like to call it, and youth justice, probation officers, various other people, academics and creative practitioners, and also police, because what we wanted to do was to see what happens when you reflect the themes of research to the police in a way that they perhaps haven't seen those themes reflected before. So quite often the police will say they've read about statistics on disproportionate stop and searches, for example. They probably know that their practices are damaging, particularly for certain communities. But what we wanted to do was to see what would happen if they maybe felt that in a different way by seeing it articulated through something creative. Because what we'd seen from our research was that those creative spaces offer quite an emotional, kind of affective site for really sort of pushing people to feel things in a different way. So that was what we did. The piece was performed. And I don't know if do you want to talk about the...
Just what I should say is you've caught a really interesting moment because the project literally happened like a month ago and we actually haven't had a proper debrief yet.
So we'll do that now.
So we're actually just inviting you to it now. So I guess, so I say that because I think we're all still like percolating, we're all still thinking about it. And everyone on this stage was involved at a different point. And so I think, and we all have a slightly different relationship with it. And it was I think it's okay. And I think as an artist, like I have to say when things are challenging, it was challenging to make work in that way is really challenging. And I said this to Amara as well. But for me, if it feels challenging, then I'm doing the right thing. And at least I'm making work, or I hope I'm making work that matters in some small way. And that's sort of what drives me. So yeah, we're still sort of like unpacking it all. And that might be why this conversation feels slightly tentative. But I think how exciting. Like, and also I don't just want to sit here and be like, well, this was great and this was great. And there were loads of brilliant things. But I think for me, authenticity and honesty is the most important thing when I make work. And that is sort of what we tried to do with this project as well. I'll say a tiny bit about like my bit of it. So I'm a freelancer, so I direct and dramaturg new work, but I also have a facilitatory practice as well. So I kind of facilitate in lots of settings. And when I was approached by the Belgrade and Jackie and Rachel about making this project, you know, I obviously a different theatre practitioner will have a different standpoint. Mine is new writing. I work with new writers. So to me, the most obvious thing to do would be to commission someone brilliant, which we absolutely did, to kind of take the research and use it as a jumping off platform and to write a brand new play. And so that's exactly what we did. But Poor Amara was only really commissioned in the summer, and the sharing was in December. So it was quite, it was a contracted time period, but I was so pleased, what we managed to create. So we did an open commission, and we met lots of brilliant people, but Amara was the obvious choice to come and work with us. And do you want to say about the next little bit? So we had the right. So Joe and I sort of like done a little bit of architecture of what we think it could look like. Then we commissioned Amara. And do you want to say the next little bit?
Then what happened? I'm waiting, like, what did happen? I think, first of all, it was such an exciting process to be able to start from research. And of course, then that also comes with lots of challenges. And so what happened was, essentially, I sat with the research. We had a bit of time together, never enough time together. Maybe that's like a general consensus for these kinds of things. It's never enough time. But sitting with the research, I think I was then getting really excited about the world that this research is situated in, and wanted to write something that both acknowledged the research and uplifted what was coming through the research, and also helps connect that research to like bigger questions, more dialogues. I think there's something about the power of theatre that is about acknowledging the intimate and how the intimate is wholly interdependent with the bigger. And so we're sitting with this research, and Rachel had shared a very I keep going back to it. This synergies document that almost made like a parallel / mirrored version of some of the things that were coming up by conversations with officers, people in the community, young people's perspectives. There were all of these like parallel synergies, divergences and nuances within that, but I became really obsessed with this document and the parallels, and how a really interesting example might have been around the idea of uniform, and we'd kind of talked about uniform and what this means to different people, but lots of these things kept coming up, and I was like, I want to write something that has a bigger question mark around safety, and how do we reimagine safety, and how the things that are coming up from this research, things that people are saying and offering verbatim, how does that point to other questions? How does that point to other things? How does it make the point that policing is not just something enacted by the police force? It's something that we all do to one another. It's something, surveillance. All of these things are facilitated by the state and us. Right, that for me, theatres was a way to say, I don't just want to point fingers at what's happening out there and what's wrong with this and da-da-da-da. I want it to be an opportunity where we do this, and sit with that. So it ended up like writing essentially a story about a family that is grieving, a family that has been impacted in lots of ways by police directly, and disconnection via the police and prison system, but also like the many layers of that grief work and what happens when people are impacted by that in different ways. And I didn't want to make a binary thing that is like police good, but police bad, people great. So something that kind of danced with removing from the binary a bit more, but that was like a start.
Yeah, I mean, one of the really fascinating things about this project, and I think we were talking over lunch about this, is the relationship between what you guys were doing and the police. And you mentioned that in the drama production, the police were invited. So I'm just interested in some of the tensions, perhaps, that there were in the police being involved in this research, as you were saying, as the object of your research rather than as a collaborative partner. So I don't know who wants to sort of reflect upon that.
I think there was some tension on a couple of levels. So I think for the Belgrade Theatre, wanting that to be a very safe space, particularly for the young people who are in there, and an agreement with local police that if they come in, they don't come in uniform. So there was a real worry about the police coming in as audience members and potentially wearing uniform. The thing that Amara picked up on those kind of synergies and those mirrorings is around, so when the police want to engage in a non-threatening way, do they come in their civvies and just chat like a regular person, or does that then feel like actually they're being a bit undercover and maybe they're intelligence gathering? And so we had the same conversation in relation to the invited members to the theatre. And obviously we wanted them to come, as Rachel said, because this was about an emotional response. This was about seeing a human story, actually, not just a statistic. And some of the officers we were liaising with, who were pretty switched on and understood, gave a clear instruction, but one quite senior officer turned up in uniform, and it was very interesting, was challenged directly. We had a big feedback session afterwards, like young people went off and had breakout rooms, and we had something in the main theatre. And, you know, he was challenged, like, why has he turned up in uniform? And he didn't kind of quite get it.
He said it's just the clothes I wear, isn't it, or something like that.
It's
just
you
what I
know,
wear to
you've
work.
got your uniform, I've got mine, you know, whatever. But there is a trickiness there, that they're the object of our research, but just as Amara was saying, it's not just about pointing the finger and saying this is bad. It's about, so how do we change it? How do we get you to understand why it's bad, you know, in a more meaningful way? How can we reimagining what better policing might look like, or no policing might look like? So it's really important to engage with them, but that in itself is a very fraught relationship. And we do want to change the world. You know, we want to change their practice. So Rachel and I have been doing some other things, some empathetic storytelling, some other things where we're hoping we might be able to then engage with them and change their training, their practices.
Can I just add from an artist point of view as well? I do think as soon as you use the word police in any of the projects that you're doing, there's an immediate guttural reaction. Oh, that must be really hard. That's really there's almost like a little you know, it's physical. And I think, yeah, as an artist, you then sort of have to kind of think about, okay, well, how do I want to be aligned with it?